Welcome to hour number 3 of this Tuesday live right here on the early line. One more hour to go up until 11 a.m. Eastern time. He is Davis Maddock filling in today for Donnie Rightside. I am Ben Stevens. So, Davis, to end out hour number 2, we heard from the people. The conversation continues here after the end of Super Wild Card Weekend, with seasons coming to a close for 6 teams around the National Football League. Whose year was more disappointing? For both teams out of the NFC East that reached the NFL playoffs, both came to a crashing halt. The Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys upset as a 7-point home favorite on Sunday at the Star by the Green Bay Packers. Dallas has now made 13 playoff appearances since its most recent Super Bowl championship in 1995. Never in those 13 tries have the Cowboys advanced past the divisional round. The Eagles made a Super Bowl a season ago to only stumble down the stretch, losing 6 of their final 7 games and losing outright as a 3-point road favorite in Tampa last night to end out the opening round of the NFL postseason. So again, Davis, we asked the public whose season was more disappointing, and more than 59% of the public going with the Philadelphia Eagles.
As they should. I mean, and it's going to be the house is going to be cleared. I would not be surprised to see an all new coaching staff in here. Maybe, you know what? Maybe this is the spot for Belichick, right? You bring Belichick in. Ooh. The roster is already really good. And welcome to everyone on radio here. Davis Maddock and Ben Stevens with you. We are talking about who had the more disappointing season between the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. So you bring Belichick in. The defense is the mess, right? The offense, I mean, yeah, obviously they stunk last night. They stunk the last couple weeks. But, like, you got the pieces there. You got A.J. Brown. You got Devonta Smith. You got Jalen Hurts. You got Dallas Goedert. Like, the offense will be fine, assuming you hire someone competent. But the defense is a mess. Belichick would be good at that, and he would probably view that as a challenge, you know, like a challenge that he could succeed at. I think I just talked myself into that one.
Oh, I like the idea, something we had not really considered. Currently, both the Eagles and the Cowboys have a head coach in place, Mike McCarthy for Dallas, Nick Sirianni for Philadelphia. But after the dismal endings of this season for both Dallas and Philly, their futures very much in question. After Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys stumbled in such a way on Sunday, the natural ties were to Bill Belichick taking over the reins at the Star for this Cowboys franchise. But maybe, as Davis just laid out, it's really for Philadelphia. Davis, my vote in the Fade the Public poll was for Philly as well, agreeing with the public. The Dallas Cowboys, again, when they last won their Super Bowl in 1995, they have appeared in 13 NFL postseasons, and they have never gone past the divisional round. This has become, sadly, if you're a Cowboys backer, or ironically comedic enough for those who like to poke fun at America's team, it has become the story. It has become the expectation for Dallas. I wouldn't bet anybody's hard-earned money on the Cowboys in an NFC championship price to win a conference title because they can't even get to the conference championship game. This year felt slightly different, but for a third consecutive year, Dallas wins 12 games, and Dallas will be going home before the divisional round comes to a close. But for Philadelphia, Davis, when you look at this Eagles team on the brink of a Super Bowl a season ago, alongside San Francisco, the last undefeated team in the NFL here in 2023, both the Birds and the Niners got off to a perfect 5-0 start before both teams lost their first game of the year in week number 6. But then Philly responded. They won their next 5 games after that. And after a victory over Kansas City on the road on a Monday night in Arrowhead, following their bye and holding on in an overtime thriller against the Buffalo Bills the next week, the Birds were off to a 10-1 start at the end of November. And at that point, Davis, they were plus 190 to win the NFC, booked as the favorites, plus 450 to win a Super Bowl, booked as the favorites at that point of the season as well. Dallas's best number were by the time the NFC East had been wrapped up for the Cowboys entering this postseason. It is why I go to Philadelphia as having the more disappointing year. Not only were expectations higher entering based on what had happened in 2022, being just 3 points away from winning a Lombardi trophy against Kansas City, but because of what we had seen during the first part of 2023, for Philly to only win one game since the end of November, that being on Christmas Day, and it wasn't easy at home against the New York Giants, booked as a 2-touchdown favorite. It truly was a disastrous end of the year for this Eagles organization.
It was. And I feel bad for Howie Roseman, who I think is probably quite a good general manager. I honestly feel pretty bad for Jason Kelsey, who I just have really come to enjoy Jason Kelsey as he has become. Yeah. Look, he's like a pop culture. He's a guy hosts like the number one sports podcast in the world right now. He's funny. He's personable. And it's just like you get to know, and I obviously love his brother as well. So it's just kind of one of those things that's a real bummer. And they were so injured, and injuries in the NFL, like one, you just come in every season knowing, like you just know half the guys on your team are going to be injured to some degree or one another. But the Eagles really built their entire team around having an amazing offensive line and an amazing pass rush. And those two things, by week 10, week 11, were just completely neutered. They had no offensive line. Lane Johnson was out. Kelsey was like the only one, I think, who played all 17. He might have even missed a game too, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. And the defensive line just disintegrated, just went to absolute zero. So you can't pressure the quarterback. You can't protect your quarterback. It's not going to be a recipe for when. It doesn't matter if you have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert and Jalen Hurts. If you literally cannot complete a pass, it just doesn't matter.
Pretty emblematic for Philly's secondary last night as well. Second worst pass defense throughout the regular season, giving up 253 yards per game. Baker Mayfield threw for 337 yards against the Birds and 3 touchdowns. Now questions to answer for both Dallas and Philadelphia entering this offseason when we didn't really think, Davis, that would be the case. So I ask you this. Will both the Birds and the Boys, the Cowboys and the Eagles, have new head coaches when the 2024 NFL season gets underway?
Yeah, I think so. Doesn't that feel like the most probable thing at this point, that the status quo is not status quo in the right direction? It feels like we're going to, maybe we might have an all-time quarterback and coaching carousel this upcoming NFL offseason.
Yeah, 7 head coaching vacancies at this moment, with plenty still spinning in that coaching carousel. Back next on the early line, Craig Mish will join us for a recap of Super Wild Card Weekend and a forecast of what is to come. Sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
He's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
This is one of the hardest jobs in all of football. You are replacing Bear Bryant. You are replacing Nick Saban. You are replacing guys who won national championships, and they still wanted him out. They still wanted him gone.
Mike Shula, you're replacing
was
him?
a disaster. Dubos was a disaster.
Gene Stallings.
That's what I mean. They ran him out. He won a national championship, and they ran Gene Stallings out.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Good move by the Clippers, and obviously, folks, they have Tyronn Lue, who I think is one of the best coaches
in the league. And I'll say this right now, folks. The way they're playing, I know Minnesota's in first. I know Oklahoma City's been great. I know Denver's been fantastic. But the team I'm thinking right now that could actually come out of the West, if they stay healthy and he keeps playing like that, it's Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. It's not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
I am not a Cowboys fan. I did not have a Cowboys ticket on this game. I bet the over, but I'm frustrated watching this game. I'm frustrated seeing the Dallas Cowboys think that this is their optimal game plan.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Live on this Tuesday on the early line, following Super Wild Card weekend in the opening round of the NFL playoffs, we welcome Craig Mish live to the early line on this Tuesday, the host of Newswire that starts in just about 50 minutes at 11 a.m. Eastern time here on the grid. A reunion on fantasy sports today that you can see each and every weekend. I feel like, Craig, I should be the guy in the middle with you and Davis on the outside asking the questions.
Yeah, well, Davis was looking so sharp, I got to say, this morning. I mean, looking like $1 million bucks. He could go out there. He could work for Wall Street. He could work for Apple, Microsoft. But in the end, he chose the place to be. Of course, that is here at SportsGrid on the early line, filling in today. So thanks for having me.
I mean, both of you guys upstaging me a little bit here with your handsome sport coats on this Tuesday morning. But, Craig, as we focus now on the football, we look back on the 6 games that happened in the opening round of the NFL playoffs on Super Wild Card weekend. 3 days of doubleheaders around the NFL, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, 2 on Monday. When you look at all 6 results, which one was the most surprising?
Yeah, I look at my bank account. It says 0 after this weekend. My gosh, I was just wrong on like every single game this week. I had a horrible weekend picking against the spread. I think I was probably under 500 for all of the games. So the most surprising result to me of all, and maybe I guess it shouldn't come as a shock to some, but I thought Miami was going to be competitive in Kansas City. And that has nothing to do with living in South Florida, Ben. You know me. I've come on the show before, picked against the Dolphins like every week, every time. I don't know. Like, I thought that even with the elements, I thought that their offense would show up. They would keep the game close. Kansas City has not played impressive all season long. So that was the one to me that surprised me the most. As far as like the result is, the low-lying fruit is just to say Green Bay going into Dallas and crushing them. But that was the one game that I actually did get right. I thought Green Bay would keep that game close. Obviously, I didn't expect them to blow them out. So in the end, for me, to watch the Dolphins play as they did all season long and just have a 0 against Kansas City, because let's be honest, Tua throws a long pass to Tyreek Hill. That was the entire offense for the game. I was shocked that it was a no-show for them in Kansas City.
It was. I was not shocked by Kansas City winning. I was shocked by Kansas City not playing that well. Like, playing good. They played fine, but they didn't even play a B-plus Chiefs game, and it really just didn't feel like there was much threat at all. The result, Craig, that I found most surprising was not that the Eagles lost. I think, 3-point favorites lose in the NFL all the time. It's basically more or less like flipping a coin. But I was incredibly surprised that they lost in a no-doubter, embarrassing Jalen Hurts getting sacked. Jalen Hurts has no time. You got no run. Like Baker Mayfield is just like dunking all over you. Mike Evans drops a 50-yard touchdown. Then the Buccaneers go back in the huddle and they just do the same play on the other side of the field. Then David Moore scores a 50-yard touchdown. Like to have a no sweat playoff win as Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, like that to me, I just like the Eagles no showing a playoff game. That was the most surprising result to me.
Yeah, look, and I understand that perspective, and look, I think that's fair too. I thought the Eagles would be able to flip the switch and turn it back on, so that was one of the ones that I got wrong as well. But looking back on it, the Eagles don't win games. You know, they haven't won games in a month and a half, so maybe we should have seen that coming. And on top of it, they haven't played defense in 2 months. So again, maybe we should have seen that coming. It would have been nice for Joe Buck and Troy Aikman to tell us before the game that they didn't get the sense that they were in on the game going into Tampa Bay. That would have been great information to know, like 10 minutes before kickoff. But regardless of that, Davis, I think your point is well taken. And the only thing that I would counter to that is to say, look, the Dolphins didn't play that well down the stretch. They did beat Dallas at home. It wasn't pretty, but they did win that game. Philadelphia was beating no one, losing to Arizona and the Giants and just getting their you-know-what's handed to them at the end of the season. So maybe we should have seen this coming at the end because the trend said that was going to happen. I bucked it. I could not believe that this was going to be the epic collapse that the Eagles ended up having.
Much like both of you, I thought Philly would figure it out for at least one playoff game on the road in Tampa. That did not happen. The Birds dropped 6 of their final 7 games, including the playoffs. They allowed at least 20 points in their last 11 games of this 2023 NFL season. You know what stood out to me about Super Wildcard Weekend? 5 of the 6 games decided by at least 2 touchdowns. Average margin of victory, 17.3 points per game. Only 1 game decided by a single score. It was by a single point. Of course, that was Sunday night in the Motor City. The Lions beating the Los Angeles Rams 24-23. So, Craig, what do you think is in store for this divisional round weekend that is upcoming? Only 8 teams remain in the hunt for the Lombardi Trophy. Will the divisional round be a little bit more competitive?
Yeah, look, it's hard to say. Wild Card Weekend does usually provide upsets, so we saw that. We saw, the Rams cover. We saw Houston win outright. We saw Green Bay win outright. And so at the very least, we saw, even though the scores were lopsided, we saw dogs winning and covering. Generally, this is where it usually corrects itself a little bit, and the favorites usually end up taking control. But I got to tell you, like with the way that the Packers are playing right now, I mean, I certainly could see that game being very close. I like Detroit against the Rams. For whatever reason, I'm the stupid one that went against that too, thinking that that Detroit was much better than the Rams. They obviously were not. I think Detroit is probably up against it a little bit too. So my estimation is no spread is safe going into the weekend. But clearly the team, to me, out of all of the teams with expectations, because I think that the Packers are playing with house money, but the most dangerous team right now, it's got to be the Buffalo Bills right now. I mean, look, that team all of a sudden is starting to play like they should have been for the entire season. I did not think they could flip the switch. Clearly, they have done it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Bills are one of those teams that they flip the switch both ways, though, right? That's the thing about them is they'll flip the switch and they'll look incredible, and then they lose to the Jake Browning Bengals. It's like the Buffalo Bills are the team they need to be, and then they scrape along against the Easton Stick Chargers. Like it's just they are one of those teams. Honestly, it's so boring. But it does just feel like everything is kind of lined up for the 2 1 seeds to get through. Obviously, that's what happened last year with Kansas City and Philadelphia. The NFC, the roadway is wide open for the 49ers, and all the Ravens have to do is beat either a Bills team that loves to turn the ball over, the Texans, and or the Chiefs, who are like, they got a good defense, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, that could happen, Davis. I know that's not what the NFL wants. I mean, they want parity. Yeah. They want big upsets, and we've seen that in the past. And I would tell you that if that did play out, and it very well could, to have San Francisco playing in the Super Bowl, there's no question about it, against the Ravens. That's what the favorites are right now. The NFL, unlike Major League Baseball, probably would want to take a second look at this and say, hey, wait, are we giving too much of an advantage to the number one seeds by not having them play? They're just going to get to the Super Bowl. No one can beat them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens down the stretch. I would say this, like I did last week and said there was going to be one huge upset. I didn't know which one. That's what I said here on Thursday. I actually thought it would have been Miami. I'll say the same thing this week. My guess is pick a spread of 4, 5, 6, whatever going in. Some team is going to beat some team that we don't see coming. Although I don't know that it's going to be the degree of what we saw this past week with a team like the Packers getting 7 or 7.5 and winning by like 100.
Those underdogs, right? The Bucs winning by 23 last night. They were a 3-point home underdog. The Packers were a 7-point dog on the road in Dallas. They won that game outright by 16 points. Craig Mish, we appreciate the time as always. We will see you on Newswire in less than 40 minutes.
All right, hot stove baseball. It's just so hot right now. Can't wait to get in it. I mean, all these signings happening. Oh my gosh, it's on fire.
Craig, talk to your people. Tell them to get something going out there. We need some scoops here on the early line.
Minor league deals. Bring it.
Big night in the association. That's next.
Introducing Sports Injury Central's new feature, The Injury Edge, your NFL matchup cheat sheet. See all the significant injury mismatches broken down by offense and defense to highlight where the advantages lie. All for only $2.99 a week. How can you even consider making a bet or setting your fantasy lineup without knowing the injury mismatches? Go to sixscore.com today and get this week's Injury Edge.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
San Francisco minus 120 to win the NFC Championship. It's the Cowboys with the second best number. The Eagles at 7-1.
What the hell's the difference between the 6 and the 7 seed? I need my guys healthy here to make a playoff push. They took the bye week and still won the football game. You want to talk about two franchises going in the wrong direction? The Eagles. Ridiculous what they did this week.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. Fantasy sports today.
They were saying there's no way he could not possibly do this. He won't hold out.
Pro League Soccer
The
powered by
goal-scoring
Marca.
teams in the league. They have 80 goals so far.
Pro Football Today.
You got to give the coaching advantage to McVay over Campbell, even though they're at home. I mean, come on.
But I think there's some interesting props in this game, but I would be cautious laying this number here with the Houston Texans.
In-game live all access.
In the NFC in terms of these wild cards and in terms of the playoff picture.
In-game live, prime time.
Rich, I don't know, man. This has just been one of those games that doesn't make a lick of sense here.
In-game live, overtime.
You want to give you over 3-1 on a pretty good team. It's hard not to take some flyers.
Football full circle.
Well, NFL officials stink. They always will stink, and they'll always ruin the game. That's just part of what it is.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Not the largest slate around the association on this Tuesday night, but marquee matchups in the 3 games that we have in the NBA. I'm Ben Stevens. He is Davis Maddock. And Davis, as we said earlier on during this show, we're almost to the halfway point of this NBA regular season for all of the 30 teams around the association. The reigning NBA champion Denver Nuggets have already reached their midway point of 2023-24. Tonight will be game number 42 for the Denver Nuggets. Again, only 3 games on the NBA slate on this Tuesday, but marquee matchups in each and every place. We start first and foremost in Philadelphia. The 76ers have the hopes of a city now on their shoulders. Philly booked as a 3-point home favorite against the Denver Nuggets, the over-under 228.5. Second leg of a back-to-back for Philly, but they will be at home. This a matchup of the MVP frontrunners. Nikola Jokic, the reigning NBA Finals MVP, who won the MVP award the 2 seasons prior to that, going up, of course, against the reigning NBA MVP, Joel Embiid, who returned in his first game after missing 3 yesterday with a 41.10 rebound performance in a win for the Sixers against the Houston Rockets. 3-point spread in favor of Philly, total at 228.5. Davis, what do you expect tonight in the city of brotherly love?
I expect, assuming that both of these fellas play, the Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic, which does not always happen. We have had a couple regular season matchups between them. We also have had Embiid not playing some. We have also had Jokic not playing some. By and large, recently, Joel Embiid has, last year, January 28th, how does 47 points and 18 rebounds sound for Mr. Embiid? Now, Jokic did not play in that game. Jokic rested in that game, so I believe that was DeAndre Jordan there guarding Joel Embiid in that game. Before that, though, Embiid had really not played well against the Denver Nuggets. I am a Jokic guy. I mean, I feel like sort of these days in the NBA, you're either a Jokic guy or you're not a Jokic guy. You know, it's like those two things. Like either you're just like Jokic is the MVP until proven differently, or you're Giannis, Embiid, Shea, whoever is the MVP. I'm a Jokic guy. I think he's the best player in the NBA. Now, he is listed as questionable for this game, and the 4-point spread would actually indicate to me that maybe the market is buying that either Jokic is not going to play in a limited capacity, because the Nuggets are a better team, 1 through 8 than the 76ers. Assuming that Jokic does play in this game, and I think he probably wants to. Well, actually, Jokic probably doesn't care. Any sort of rivalry versus Embiid, he literally probably does not care. He sleeps fine at night, just like not thinking about Joel Embiid at all. But come on, assuming Embiid plays, I'm on the Nuggets here all day, like not even close.
Nikola Jokic in this month of January has played in 7 games for the Denver Nuggets. He has attempted 84 field goals. He is shooting 77.4% from the floor. Highly efficient, but his points prop 25.5 as compared to Joel Embiid, who was at 32.5. 17 consecutive games. When Embiid has been on the floor for Philadelphia, he has scored at least 30 points, including, again, 41 and 10 yesterday in his return against the Houston Rockets. Now, Joel Embiid has already missed double-digit amount of games in this NBA regular season, and there is that award minimum that you have to play, 65 of your team's 82 regular season games, to still be in consideration for that individual honor. It is part of the reason I believe, Davis, that Joel Embiid has moved back in the MVP market, now an 8-1 number. Nikola Jokic is booked as the favorite at plus 170. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who we'll talk about in just a moment, at plus 280. So it seems as though the odds makers agree with you, Davis. They're all Nikola Jokic guys, or Nikola Jokic backers, at least from the odds perspective of being that MVP frontrunner. Do you think the Joker makes it 3 NBA MVP awards in the last 4 seasons?
Actually, I think Shea is going to win because the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to continue going really hard in the regular season. I think there are a lot of scenarios where Shea ends up being the best player on the team that wins the most games in the Western Conference. And he's going to average like 33 points per game on like 54% true shooting. He's also become a really good defensive player. I also think the fact that Oklahoma City doesn't have another guy that's going to make the All-Star game, another recognizable, Chet is obviously great. Dort is very good. Jalen Williams is very strong, but none of these guys are like recognizable, household names. I think that all benefits Shea. And, you can't forget, NBA voters, they're like everyone else. They get bored. It's like the reason why Michael Jordan didn't win 9 MVPs. It's why LeBron doesn't have, I think you could make an argument that LeBron should have 8 or 9 MVPs, legitimately, but they don't, because that's not the way that the award works, right? And I mean, it happens in the NFL too. Like Mahomes not getting the 2021 MVP over Rodgers. There are a lot of examples like that. So I actually think Shea kind of gets a benefit from just being, the new kid on the block effectively. So if I was going to bet on one guy, if I was going to bet on someone right now, I probably would bet on Anthony Edwards, because Anthony Edwards has the same thing going for him that Shea does, which is he's the best player on the team that might end up finishing number 1 in the Western Conference. And he's not scoring enough points right now, not enough raw points right now, but I think he could get there. If Karl Anthony Towns misses a month or something like that, he would actually benefit from his missing a time with injury.
Listen, there are the quantifiable metrics, right, of setting the odds, of setting the numbers for the MVP market, and you can base it on performances throughout a season, but it is a narrative award voted on by media members for who becomes that NBA MVP. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, second best price at plus 280. But last night for SGA and the Thunder in Los Angeles, booked as a slight road favorite, they lost outright to the Lakers in the Crypto.com arena. 112-105 the final score. Anthony Davis 27 and 15. LeBron James 25, 7 and 6. And just for the third time in the last 15 games for Oklahoma City, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander scored less than 30 points. Second leg of a back-to-back for OKC, but they remain in LA. Line working against them. However, the Clippers now a 6.5-point favorite as the Thunder face off against the other Los Angeles team. And not just the second leg of a back-to-back, but the Clips, Davis, are on a roll. 8 and 10, was the record for LA at the end of the month of November. Since that point, the Clippers have won 17 of their last 21 games, booked as a 6.5-point home favorite tonight against Oklahoma City. Who keeps it rolling tonight in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I mean, doesn't this spread? Okay, the last time that I saw Oklahoma City as a dog on a back-to-back for a team that I couldn't really understand why, it was against the Atlanta Hawks, and they got smoked by that Atlanta Hawks team. And and no one sat. Shea played, Chet played, Dort played, everyone played. And Shea was questionable last night with a right knee contusion. Ended up playing, didn't play that well. He's listed as questionable again tonight. We'll see if he plays. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. The line is, I think the line is probably saying he is playing. I mean, it feels crazy because I was so, when the Clippers traded for James Harden, I was like, I don't love the fit. I don't really see it. And it looked, that looked really correct for 8 games. And then it looked really, really incorrect after that. They are absolutely ripping them off right now. No one can do anything with Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard is back to being top 5 player in the NBA, shooting, getting to his spot every time, playing phenomenal defense. He's just, it's really, the Clippers, man, this might be the best iteration of the Clippers we've seen since I think these Clippers are better than the CP3 Blake Griffin Clippers.
And that will be the fascinating part because, as Davis alluded to, the Timberwolves right now the best record in the Western Conference, a full game in front of both OKC and Denver at this moment. But the T-Wolves 8-1, OKC plus 850. The Nuggets remain the favorites at plus 185, and there's a $3 drop-off from Denver to L.A., but it is the Clippers with the second best price at 5-1. The Phoenix Suns, third best number at plus 600. That's the third and final game in the NBA tonight. Phoenix at home in the Valley hosting the Sacramento Kings. A 4-point spread in favor of the Suns and over-under at 243.5. Davis, what do you like tonight out in Phoenix?
Give me the Suns here. The Suns, it's actually happening for them. You know, they're finally are getting a sequence together where the three guys are all playing together, you know, which basically had not happened until I think like 10 days ago was the first time that they all got through 2 consecutive games with all of them healthy. And they're also starting to toss out my favorite lineups in the NBA, which are Kevin Durant at center lineups. I mean, come on, one of the great, like literally maybe the greatest scorer, pure scorer in NBA history playing center for that is an unstoppable lineup. And I know Sabonis is like, he just gets a triple double every single night right now, but you gotta give me the Suns here.
Yeah, the Suns have won 7 of their last 10 games, including 2 in a row. They've only covered once in this 2-game win streak, but the time they didn't was against Portland. They won by 11. They were just booked as a 14-point favorite. Sacramento, good as an underdog, though, 7-3 against the spread. 5 of those 7 covers for the Kings, an outright victory. From the NBA to college hoops. After a chaotic week, John Rothstein joins us live next here on the Early Line. Sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I
favorite.
don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby. The money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
This is one of the hardest jobs in all of football. You are replacing Bear Bryant. You are replacing Nick Saban. You are replacing guys who won national championships, and they still wanted them out. They still wanted them gone.
Mike Shula,
Mike Shula was a disaster. Dubos was a disaster.
Gene Stallings.
That's what I mean. They ran him out. He won a national championship, and they ran Gene Stallings out.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Good move by the Clippers, and obviously, folks, they have Tyronn Lue, who I think is one of the best coaches in the league. And I'll say this right now, folks, the way they're playing, I know Minnesota's in first. I know Oklahoma City's been great. I know Denver's been fantastic. But the team I'm thinking right now that could actually come out of the West, if they stay healthy, and he keeps playing like that, it's Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those 2 plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. Not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
I am not a Cowboys fan. I did not have a Cowboys ticket on this game. I bet the over, but I'm frustrated watching this game. I'm frustrated seeing the Dallas Cowboys think that this is their optimal game plan.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This might only be January in men's college basketball, but the last week has certainly had the madness of March infused. We are back live right here on this Tuesday on the early line on SportsGrid. I am Ben Stevens. Very pleased to welcome on our guy on behalf of FanDuel, of course, doing some great work with CBS Sports as well. John Rothstein joins us on this Tuesday on the early line. John, last week was chaotic in college hoops. This week, might we see more of the same? Some great rivalry matchups to start off a new week in conference action that we will break down on this Tuesday. But first, we say thank you for joining us here on SportsGrid.
Ben, always great to be with you. This is only January, but there's already March-like chaos in college basketball. Why somebody would opt to use vacation time during the middle of January when we're in the heat of conference play is beyond me.
You would have to bring that up with the other guy, Donnie Rightside, when he is back next week with us here on the early line. Could not be me. I know it would not be you, John. That is for sure. So a ton of reshuffling, John, in the AP Top 25 that came out yesterday. UConn, despite winning 3 national championships in the last 15 years, ranked number 1 in the country for the first time since the 2009 college basketball season. But the reason for all of the reshuffling is last week, John, 8 of the AP Top 10 suffered at least one loss. 15 teams ranked inside the AP poll suffering at least one loss in the past week as well. Is the chaos that we are already seeing early in conference play have any significance for the rest of the year into March in college hoops?
Well, I think it's really a microcosm of what college basketball is today with the transfer portal and the lack of player attention that exists in the sport. And I said this last week, and I've said it on multiple platforms, just like we saw last season where no 1 or 2 seeds made the Final Four, it would not be a surprise if the same thing happened in a couple of months in Arizona in April. I mean, this is what we're looking at right now in college basketball, because as soon as you find out the answers, somebody else is changing the questions.
John, last week, one of those teams that was upset who ranked inside the top 25, the number 1 team in the land, the Purdue Boilermakers. Purdue did not stumble all that far in the AP Top 25, still ranked 2nd in the country in receiving plenty of first-place votes. But it's a rivalry night in Bloomington, Indiana. John, there is a saying in college basketball. In 49 other states, it's just basketball, but in Indiana, it means everything. It's the Boilermakers and the Hoosiers tonight inside Assembly Hall, where last year Indiana won both of the regular season matchups for the first time since the 2013 campaign in college hoops, and yet the Boilers still booked as a 9.5-point favorite tonight in Bloomington. What do you expect tonight inside the hallowed halls of Assembly Hall?
I expect Purdue to win the game and win the game convincingly. You know, the one thing obviously that we're seeing with Purdue is in order to beat the Boilers, you have to be able to go over the top of the defense, which is something that Nebraska did. It's something obviously we've seen teams in the past do, either go over the top of the defense and make threes or be in a situation where you can get Zach Edey moving away from the basket. But Indiana has been a very limited team shooting the basketball this season. And Ben, we're in a situation right now where I think you can say arguably the 4 best brands in the Big Ten, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio State, and Michigan State, are all far from locks to make the NCAA tournament. And the Big Ten, in the last 3 years combined, we have seen 26 teams make the NCAA tournament. I would be shocked if the Big Ten gets more than half of its league in the field in 2024. That means 7 teams or less, in my opinion, from the Big Ten in the NCAA tournament.
The Boilermakers still booked as the favorite to win the national championship and cut down the nets in early April, an 8-1 number. John, I have already established a theory that I would like to share to you. Of course, we have only seen ever in the history of the NCAA tournament since the field expanded to 64 in 1985, 2 number 1 seeds lose in the round of 64. Virginia a couple of years ago against UMBC. UVA followed it up the following season with a national title. Last year, the Purdue Boilermakers upset by the 16 seed Fairleigh Dickinson. Is history going to repeat itself? Can Purdue win a national championship in 2023-24?
Purdue definitely can, and Purdue is capable of winning 6 games in the NCAA tournament. But the fact is, until Purdue proves that it's capable of not just advancing, but advancing far in the bracket in March, this is going to be the storyline. And I've said that to you throughout the offseason. I've said that to you during the season, because these are the facts. In the last 2 years, Purdue has been good enough to go to a Final Four, and in the last 2 years, it has lost to a 15 seed in St. Peter's and a 16 seed in Fairleigh Dickinson. And the dream, obviously, is always to win a national championship. That's why coaches coach. That's why players play. But in order for Purdue, again, to exercise the demon from last year's loss to Fairleigh Dickinson, the biggest upset in the history of the NCAA tournament, Purdue has to make the Final Four. Anything less will not allow the Boilers and this group of people to truly bookend that horrific loss a year ago.
And that's something Purdue has not done since the 1980 NCAA tournament, reach a Final Four that is more than 4 decades, from the Big Ten to the Big 12. John, we talked about all the chaos last week in college basketball. Only 10 teams that were ranked avoided an upset in either of their 2 games a week ago. One of those teams, Scott Drew's Baylor Bears, now ranked inside the top 10. The Bears, number 9 in the country. They take on a K-State team that made a magical run last year in the NCAA tournament tonight inside the Little Apple in Manhattan, Kansas. Baylor booked as only a 1.5-point favorite, just minus 118 now on the money line. John, why is it so difficult to win on the road in conference play?
Well, one thing we have to look at, especially in a league like the Big 12, is just tremendous home court advantages. And I think, you're going to see that tonight in the Octagon of Doom. We've seen it, last week at Fifth Third Arena with Cincinnati, who's brand new to the league. But Fifth Third Arena has quietly been for years one of the best home courts in college basketball. We're going to see it, obviously, tonight with Iowa State and BYU at the Marriott Center. Great home court advantages, and also, I think, great guard play. And I think that's one of the things that Baylor is going to have to deal with tonight with Tyler Perry of Kansas State. But, the game within the game here, Ben, is the Scott Drew coaching tree. And everybody knows about Jerome Tang, who was the top lieutenant on that Baylor team in 2021 that won a national championship. But Grant McCasland is also a former Baylor assistant. So think about this. On Saturday, Jerome Tang and Grant McCasland, who were both assistants under Scott Drew at Baylor, went head-to-head. And then Jerome Tang, a couple of days later, is going to meet his best friend and mentor in the Octagon of Doom. Baylor, a perfect record right now in Big 12 play. But in order to have success in the Big 12, and coaches have told me this repeatedly, you have to only look at the next game on your schedule, because if you look too far in advance, you're going to get beat because you're not staying focused on the present.
7 teams from the Big 12 ranked in this week's AP Top 25, including those 2 teams John mentioned that will face off in Provo tonight. BYU in its inaugural Big 12 season, 20th in the country, in a 4.5-point favorite against an Iowa State team that last week in Ames had a little bit of Hilton magic, handing Houston its first loss of this 2023-24 college basketball season. Again, John, the Cougars a 4.5-point favorite at home tonight against the Cyclones. What's the breakdown in Provo?
Well, BYU has put itself in a situation right now where, because it did so much damage in the non-conference portion of the schedule, if it can just be a capable team at home, it will find its way into the NCAA tournament. For BYU, though, you've already lost your first home game of the year to Cincinnati at the Marriott Center in terms of Big 12 play. You can't afford to go 0-2 at home if you're trying to make the NCAA tournament. Iowa State, though, again under TJ Otzelberger, quite formidable. Tamin Lipsey is one of the more under-the-radar point guards in college basketball. He's having another tremendous season. And TJ Otzelberger is somebody who was a part of Fred Hoiberg's staff at Iowa State when Fred Hoiberg really went into the transfer portal before the transfer portal was a thing in the sport, Ben, has really embraced getting older and stronger up front. The guys he uses up front, Trey King, Hassan Ward, these are all older college players, Robert Jones as well, that are old, experienced, and grizzled. I expect a typical Big 12 game, but I do think that BYU at home will find a way to get the W.
That first home game between new Big 12 members, it was BYU against Cincinnati. The Cougars were booked as a 10-point home favorite, lost outright by 11 points. My apologies, some bad counting on my end. 8 teams from the Big 12 ranked inside the top 25 this week, including 15th ranked Oklahoma. I was already thinking the Sooners were on to the SEC. So, John, when you look at the Big 12, top to bottom, Kansas still remains the favorite to win the conference championship, despite Baylor and Texas Tech, the only perfect 3-0 teams in the league. Is this the best conference, the Big 12, in all of college basketball?
It is. The Big 12, I do think, though, is missing something by no longer having the double round robin format. You feel that when you watch the Big East, the only power conference that still uses the double round robin format. But the Big 12 still, and we've seen it again, at the bottom is still very, very capable. Last week, Ben, teams that were completely off the radar from making the NCAA tournament, Central Florida and West Virginia, beat 2 teams, Kansas and Texas, that were firmly entrenched in the tournament picture. It was a costly loss for Texas and Morgantown, a loss that if the Longhorns are on the bubble, will follow them all the way to Selection Sunday like a 5-pound dumbbell on its ankle. And then Central Florida, a team who in its first ever Big 12 game lost 77-52 at Kansas State, comes home and gets its first ever Big 12 win against Kansas. Ben, I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's not anarchy. It's just college basketball.
And you do not wait until March to consume all of this madness. Now, from the Big 12 to the SEC, an early tip tonight, 5 p.m. Eastern time on Old Rocky Top between Tennessee and Florida. The Volunteers booked as a 9.5-point home favorite, over under 158.5. John, do you expect tonight's game in Knoxville to be a little bit more competitive than that 9.5-point spread might say?
Tennessee is a very, very capable team and a dangerous team at home. And, Tennessee, as we look right now into our crystal ball down the road, I think you can say without question that this is Rick Barnes' best chance to get to a Final Four since 2019, where he lost in the Sweet 16 to Purdue. That was the team that had Grant Williams and Admiral Schofield. Tennessee's offense really came to the forefront on Saturday in a comeback win at Georgia. Dalton Knecht has been sensational in the last 2 games, looking like an All-American. But I think the unique thing to me, Ben, about Tennessee is now that the Vols are at full strength, Rick Barnes really has 8 starters because the guys that he uses in reserve, Tobe Awaka, Jemai Meshack, and also Jordan Gainey, a transfer from USC Upstate, are all good enough to be starting caliber players. Zakai Ziegler is looking back in vintage form. Rick Barnes has averaged 24 wins in the last 6 years as Tennessee's head coach, but he hasn't gotten past the Sweet 16. So again, I don't want to say it all comes down to the NCAA tournament, but that is how Tennessee will be ultimately defined. But until proven otherwise, this is the team to beat in the SEC.
5 NCAA tournament appearances for Rick Barnes in his 8th year in Knoxville. Never passed the Sweet 16. John Rothstein, a sincere thank you as always. A best bet up next. Sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I don't
favorite.
care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby. The money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
This is one of the hardest jobs in all of football. You are replacing Bear Bryant. You are replacing Nick Saban. You are replacing guys who won national championships, and they still wanted him out. They still wanted him gone.
Mike Shula, you're
Mike Shula
replacing
was
him.
a disaster. Dubos was a disaster.
Gene Stallings.
That's what I mean. They ran him out. He won a national championship, and they ran Gene Stallings out.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Good move by the Clippers, and obviously, folks, they have Tyronn Lue, who I think is one of the best coaches in the league. And I'll say this right now, folks, the way they're playing, I know Minnesota's in first. I know Oklahoma City's been great. I know Denver's been fantastic. But the team I'm thinking right now that could actually come out of the West, if they stay healthy, and he keeps playing like that, it's Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. It's not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
I am not a Cowboys fan. I did not have a Cowboys ticket on this game. I bet the over, but I'm frustrated watching this game. I'm frustrated seeing the Dallas Cowboys think that this is their optimal game plan.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Closing out our 3 hours together live right here on this Tuesday on the Early Line on SportsGrid. I am Ben Stevens. He is Davis Maddock, and this is the SportsGrid app. Even when we leave, the SportsGrid app is always there. Available for download at both the Apple and the Play Store. You scan the QR code on your screen. In the SportsGrid app, there are things known as 5-star plays. Those are best bets. So are these. Before we say farewell on this Tuesday, before we say goodbye, it is time for Bye Bye Bye. Davis Maddock, tell the people on this Tuesday night, what is your best bet across the sports landscape?
All right, we are going to be locked in to the showdown in the NBA tonight. Look, I know the people are really hoping to get my takes on, Georgia Tech, Clemson tonight. They're gonna, we're gonna save that. That'll be when I go on Pharrell Coast to Coast this afternoon. I'm taking the Denver Nuggets. I'm taking the Denver Nuggets and the points on the road against the Philadelphia 76ers. I am assuming, I just did a quick search while we were at break. I don't see any evidence that Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, or Michael Porter Jr. will not be playing in this game. The 76ers are actually the team at a little bit of a health disadvantage right now. DeAnthony Melton is out. I'm taking the Denver Nuggets as my best bet.
So many spots for me tonight, Davis, in college basketball as this Tuesday slate really ramps up. You read between the lines in conference play with teams at home, and you will start to figure out what the odds are telling you. Like Davis's alma mater, Kansas State tonight inside the Octagon of Doom against Scott Drew and the Baylor Bears. Now ranked 9th in the country. Baylor is a perfect 3-0 in Big 12 play, and yet is only a 1.5 favorite against K-State. Hard to walk into the Little Apple and come out with a victory in Manhattan, Kansas. I would look at K-State winning outright. I would also look at a spot for a Dayton team, perfect in A10 play, laying 12.5 against St. Louis. Davis, appreciate you filling in for Donnie Right Side. We'll be back tomorrow, 8 a.m. Eastern Time here on the Early Line.